Hello everyone, I'm Billy and let's talk books. So today we are doing a deep dive, or a beginning of a deep dive, into Leigh Bardugo. Now, I know that Leigh Bardugo had a Netflix adaptation of Shadow and Bone, which I'm really keen to watch. It looks really great. And so I wanted to read the series first before I kind of binge the show. And I also wanted to just get a little more into Leigh Bardugo as an author, because a lot of people that I respect their opinion really enjoys Leigh Bardugo's writing. So I'm going to be doing that today, and I'm going to start by going through two of her series. The first is the Shadow and Bone series, and I will be reading the first book, Shadow and Bone, in this video. And also I wanted to look more into her adult works as well, and so I have read Ninth House as well by her, which is kind of like a dark academia. So Shadow and Bone is a fantasy series, a YA fantasy series, and I believe the Netflix show is based on that series and her duology as well. I think I've read both of these, and I'm going to be talking a little bit about them in today's video. First of all, we're going to go with Shadow and Bone. Now, Shadow and Bone is set in the Grishaverse. So it's a fantasy world where you have Grisha, who basically have different powers. Some have the ability to heal, some have the ability to kill, others have the ability to kind of utilize the elements in certain ways. So we follow our protagonist, Alina. I love that name, by the way. Alina, what a great name. We follow her as she is in the army, and she is due to cross what they call the Shadow Fold. Now, this is a really dangerous area. It's basically pitch blackness and has monsters within, and most people don't attempt to cross, but sometimes they bring trade across, and Alina's unit is going to be crossing the Shadow Fold. We follow her as she gets ready to do so. Now, she is there with her childhood best friend Mal. They grew up together, and they're both going to be attempting this crossing. Now, when they do, they get attacked by the Volcra, the monsters, and all of a sudden Alina does whatever she can to save Mal because he is in great danger, and she learns that she has an ability to create light. Now, this makes her a Grisha also, and she gains the attention of the Darkling, who is basically the leader of the Grisha, because nobody else can exhibit this kind of power. He is the darkness and she is the light, and then it kind of follows Alina's story in that way. Now, I did really enjoy this, actually. I had a great time reading it. I think that I would say it's definitely a typical kind of YA story. So I don't say that in a bad way at all. It's just there can be tropey things and you kind of can see what's going to happen, but I still very much enjoyed it. The thing I enjoyed the most about this novel was the world. I loved the way that it all kind of came together. I hadn't really seen this kind of influence in culture within a fantasy setting before, so I thought that was a really welcome change. I enjoyed Alina as a protagonist as well. I think that she had a little bit of the I have to make myself small and I'm not really powerful. I'm not great actually, even though everybody else seems to think I am, kind of going for her, which is not my favorite, but I did still enjoy her as a character. I will say that I found the story engaging. I liked the idea of the different Grisha, and I enjoyed the characters. I felt that the ending was a little bit fast-paced. I would have liked it to maybe extend the first 2/3 into one book and make that a bit more in depth, and then maybe have the last third in the second book. I think that would have worked a bit better. It was a great start to the series. I think the main thing that I needed was, do I care about this world and do I care about the main characters? Now, I really cared about the world. I really enjoyed kind of the setup of the map and everything, and I also really enjoyed Alina. She wasn't like my favorite. She's no like Katniss in my opinion, but I still liked her, so she didn't kind of like annoy me in any way. The love interests in this narrative, I I'm not sure. I didn't really like either love interest, to be honest. But we'll see what happens. I will explain a little bit more about that in my spoiler section. What else? Oh, Genya. Is it Genya or Genya? I think Genya. Oh my goodness, I loved her so much. I think she was my favorite character throughout the series. She was the one who just like stole my heart. Loved her. She's my favorite. I really enjoyed the way that they had the different colors for the different Grisha and their specialities. I thought that was just a nice little way to set it up and neaten it out on like who has what ability. And the conversations and themes of kind of power, control, armies and laws, and how you follow those laws and how you find independence or rebellion if you need to. I really liked those themes within the novel. Also, the idea that I really enjoyed about Alina was, I feel like maybe growing up in an orphanage, not having much, living in poverty, seeing herself as quite basic. She struggled quite a lot with self-doubt and shame, and I liked the idea that maybe she had suppressed her own abilities for such a long time because of this feeling of shame. And I think that's quite an interesting commentary on the human psyche and how people can kind of dim their own light so as not to cause issues, or because they feel like they can't show it. So I liked that about Alina's character a lot as well. Yeah, I think I'll go into a spoiler section now. I will put some timestamps on here, so if you just want to skip this if you have not read it yet, and then I will give my final rating at the end. So spoilers now. I'm going to talk about the love interest a little bit. So at first, I really liked Mal, and I loved Mal and Alina. I enjoy that trope of like, you know, they grew up together and one of them is in love with the other one, but the other one doesn't know, and then they find out, and it's just really, really sweet. And I really enjoyed their bond, especially I felt like Leigh Bardugo did an excellent job setting it up in the first chapter, that they kind of only had each other, and because of that they'd formed such a close bond. And so I was really rooting for them, to be honest. And then I felt a little bit like when Mal came back, he just wasn't really acting in a way that I appreciated at all. Like, I understand that he hadn't got any of Alina's letters and he was really worried about her, and she'd kind of just been taken away, and I can understand why he would have felt so frustrated and upset, but I felt like he kind of took that out on Alina, like it was somehow her fault when she hadn't done anything wrong. She tried to reach out to him, and I just don't really like that, you know, projection of your own feelings onto somebody else who doesn't deserve it. So I didn't like that. And I also felt a bit like he almost resented her in a way for what she had and what she'd come to have. And I also felt a little bit like obviously he left the army for her, and like that's amazing, and he helped her get away and escape and try to find the stag, but at times it felt a little bit like he was holding that against her and almost like throwing it in her face a little bit. And it's like, you know, if you don't want to help, then just don't. Like, I'd rather you go about your own business. Like, don't be like, oh, I love you and I want to help you, but I'm going to be really salty about it. And he was just a bit too focused on like being jealous and, oh, but do you like me, rather than the difficulty of the situation. I call this the Gale effect. Let's call this the Gale effect from the Hunger Games, where it's like, we've got more important things to think about, you know? Like, you don't need to make it about this like love triangle or who likes who, or do you like me. I think like we should focus a bit more on our safety and like our ability to be free and to be happy. So I just, by the end, I was a little bit like disappointed in Mal. Maybe he will redeem himself for me. But yeah, now we'll talk about the Darkling as well. I think that the Darkling was a fascinating character. I wasn't sure at first, like, are we going there? Is it going to be a love interest, kind of like a enemies to lovers almost? And I was kind of open to it. I wasn't like rooting or pulling for it, but I was just seeing what happened. But I think as time went on, there were just more and more hints that things were not quite what they seem. I think I found him to be very manipulative and calculated. The way that he would always kind of put things into Alina's head, like, this is the way you feel and I understand you, nobody else does, and you're not going to belong anywhere. Like, it just felt it felt very like twisted and like manipulative. And I think, you know, it was clear by the end that he wanted control over her. It wasn't so much that he wanted an equal, even though he was kind of suggesting that he wanted an equal. It was more that he wanted to control her and subdue her so that she couldn't shine for herself, if you will. So yeah, I thought that he was a fascinating character, and I don't get his motivation though. Like, why did he create the Shadowfold? Why is he wanting to expand it? Maybe I've missed something. I did read it a little while ago now, but I didn't really think that was too clear on why he was doing what he was doing. Maybe like for freedom, for power, because I think the Grisha are a bit oppressed in a way in this society, but also there was some interesting commentaries on that as well. I think there was a point in the novel where they talk about, you know, like lots of people would kill to have what you have. I think this was referring to Alina, like she's living in a palace, she has beautiful clothing and like lots of amazing food, and there's a lot of people that would kill to be in that position. So I always like when they call out privilege in that way, and that doesn't mean that she's not also struggling, but it's just a nice little reality check that I appreciated. Definitely by the end, I wasn't really rooting for either of the love interests, to be honest. I like Alina on her own. I hope that she kind of, in the next couple of novels, goes on a bit of a self-discovery and like realizing that she is the one that she should put first and focus on, because I think she was a bit more focused on the boys in her life. Well, the Darkling isn't really a boy, but you know what I mean. I wasn't too sure on the ending, so I mentioned this before. I feel like I would have liked it if we got more information on the army and Alina's life kind of before she discovered things, and then more on the palace and her kind of training montage and her getting to know the politics around the castle and things like that. And then we could have moved on, because it seemed to me like she kind of just, Mal came, she found out the truth about the Darkling, and then she ran away, and I feel like that would have been a great end point, but instead we then go on this big hunt for the stag, and I found that part really dull, honestly. Like, I struggled through that bit quite a bit. And then, you know, they get captured again, they get taken by the Darkling, and Alina is forced to kind of help as she's now under his control. I felt like maybe that could have been the next book. I'm not sure. Or I guess for me, it wasn't like given enough attention. So I would have liked more in terms of her being under the Darkling's control and how he was planning on using her and how he was expanding the fold, and more about the Grisha that were following him and why they were following him. So I guess for me, I would have liked a bit more on that. It just felt a little bit rushed for me, I think, by the ending. I will say as well, there was a little bit of stereotyping of women in this that I wasn't too fond of. I felt like you were kind of the victim or the villain kind of thing. You had this, you had Jenya versus Zoya. I think if we compare the two of those, I think it's quite interesting, because Jenya's very beautiful and soft-spoken, but she's the victim of men in power. And then you have Zoya, who's also very beautiful, but she's more the villain, and she's out to tear other women down. So I thought those were a bit stereotypical. And then obviously you've got Alina, who is beautiful and talented and amazing, but thinks she's like, oh, I'm so ugly and I can't do anything. So we had a few like stereotypes in there, like tropey things. But again, this is a YA, so I'm not too mad at it. I think that it's okay. Overall, I gave this a 3.5 and I rounded that down to a 3. So it's 3.5 rounded down. Solid book. Really enjoyed the world building. Would like to continue the series, but didn't kind of blow me away. So that's what I will say about that one. So the next book I read by Leigh Bardugo was Ninth House, and this is the first in, is it a duology or a trilogy? I'm not sure, but the Alex Stern series. Now this is aimed at a more adult audience, and they definitely were very different. So again, I think that Leigh Bardugo did a fantastic job at world building here. This follows Alex as she basically is given the chance to attend Yale as one of the members of a secret society. So since she was a child, she has been able to see greys, which are ghosts, and most people are not able to see ghosts or greys. I'll call them greys. We'll call them greys for the rest of this video. So most people are not able to see greys unless they take a specific potion, and I think it's quite a risk to be able to do that. So the fact that Alex is able to see them is quite a huge thing. She has had some difficulties in her life, becoming addicted to drugs. They find her in in a hospital, seemingly overdosed, and offer her the chance of attending Yale. She then kind of is inducted into the 9th house, which is the house responsible for kind of surveying the other 8 houses and making sure that they are following rules. She is almost being trained by a mentor called Darlington when she attends Yale, and we kind of follow from there, seeing her journey throughout this academic setting and learning more about the magic that takes place there. Once again, I think Leigh Bardugo did a fantastic world building. I loved the university setting, and I was thinking to myself, I don't think I've ever read a fantasy series set at university. It's always been high school, and maybe this is kind of my lapse in reading over the past 10 years, but it never used to be. The ones that I'd read kind of never had followed university settings. So I loved that. It definitely felt more true to where I am in life. And I've always been fascinated by Yale. I think Yale might be my most intriguing college in America. So I loved seeing that. And I think right from the beginning, I was really hooked on that. I remember sitting and just pondering over the map and trying to kind of learn where things were and what it looked like. And I never normally do that with a fantasy. I will read for a while and then refer back to the map. But this time around, I just was fascinated by it. So I spent a lot of time there. I also learned that a lot of inspiration was taken from real life secret societies. So I thought that that was just a great idea, kind of bringing the occult into these secret societies and magic. So I really enjoyed that element of it. Alex as a protagonist, I very much liked. I would say I very much liked at the beginning, and by the end got a bit frustrated with. But I really liked that she wasn't a stereotypical protagonist. Like, we didn't just have, kind of like with Malina, it wasn't just this wonderful white girl who thinks she's nothing but is actually really good at everything. Alex really felt like somebody raw and real. She struggled. She wasn't perfect. Like, she didn't have much ambition or drive. She just wanted to kind of get by, and you could really understand where that was coming from. She had a lot of difficulties and she'd been through a lot of trauma, so a lot of her decision making was shaped by that. I really liked how he explored her capacity to kind of repeat patterns and just find ways of coping. I liked her as a protagonist. I definitely felt that later on it was a bit frustrating, and I think for me that was because of the structure. I think the worst part of this novel for me was the structure. It really took me out of the storytelling. I feel like if it was done in a more chronological way with like some flashbacks, that would have been much better for me, because I felt like a lot of the times I was really getting into something and then we'd completely change timelines and I'd be like, oh, I really don't want to change right now, and it just didn't really work for me at all. It just felt like we were kind of drip fed bits of information, and it was all trying to like be this big puzzle piece conundrum that you have to put together, and then the ending just kind of conveniently info dumped the answers on our laps. So I really didn't like that. I would have much preferred a more chronological, we kind of go with the story and figure out as time goes on. I think then we could have felt more for Darlington, learned more about their growth, and it would have felt just a bit more organic in how the character development changed. Whereas this way, it just like you got snippets. I guess it just doesn't really work for me. I would have liked it a different way, and that really pulled the narrative down for me. I feel like if I'd have read this with a different structure, I would have had a much different feeling about it. So yeah, I really liked the concept of greys and how the different houses had different specialties. That was a fascinating turn of events. I thought it was very well done and engaging. Yeah, so I really enjoyed that. My favorite part of this narrative though was the discussions of privilege and trauma and kind of who gets left behind, who gets to decide what decisions to make, and who is going to be sacrificed in the process. And I thought that this was really well done. I'm going to go through some of my favorite quotes to do with this topic, but I will do that more in the spoiler section. And I just really appreciated the development of Darlington as a character. I felt that he began as kind of a typical privileged, judgmental type who just didn't really have a perspective or a nuanced understanding of the world, and slowly Alex and his experience meeting Alex developed his mindset. I also really enjoyed how Alex was kind of able to point out the hypocrisy and challenge and call into question the ethics of this kind of a system. So that, yeah, there's a lot of like interesting points there that I think was probably my favorite part of this narrative. There were some great quotes. Like, one of my favorites was by Darlington, which is, "I clasp profanity with declarations of love, best used sparingly and only when wholeheartedly meant." And I loved that. I think it really tells you everything you need to know about Darlington as a character. He's a very calm and collected person, and he doesn't express intense emotion unless completely necessary. Whereas Alex feels very much the opposite of that. She is just all emotion, balls of emotion and impulsivity, and she will love and hate like loudly and largely in equal measure, which I appreciated. I thought that the two of them learnt a lot from each other, which was really good. It was a great dynamic. I did end up really liking Darlington, though, by the end of the narrative. I think Darlington, also Turner, and who was the other one? Dawes as well. Great side characters that I really liked. I wish that we had more focus on them, though. Mercy as well. I was really attached to Mercy and I wanted to know more about her. I also want to talk about the graphic nature of some of the content in here. Now, I knew that this was an adult novel and I really don't mind that. I don't mind more intense scenes within narratives if they are done appropriately, and I think that they have purpose. And I do think that a lot of the stuff in here had purpose, however, potentially wasn't done in the best way. I think that some of it felt a bit too gratuitous at times, and some of it wasn't given the proper weight and meaning that maybe it could have been. So I'll talk a bit more about that in the spoiler section as well, but I'd say that was a little bit questionable for me in terms of whether I thought it was acceptable or not. I think the themes were acceptable maybe, but maybe the way of presenting them, not so much. Now, I'll talk about the ending. No spoilers though. I was quite dissatisfied with the ending once again. I felt it was very rushed. It was very much a tell, don't show. We are just now having kind of monologuing, the villain telling us exactly what they did and why they did it. And it just kind of felt a little unsatisfying for me. Like, I was waiting for some answers and then they were given, but it just, yeah, I didn't really like the ending at all, to be honest. I'm interested in the next book, but I was just much more invested in the first half of the novel, I would say. It kind of went downhill from there for me. So I'm going to talk more about spoilers now, and this is your warning to click off the video if you don't want any spoilers, or I will put another time skip where you can go over it and come back for my final rating. Now, I want to talk about some of the graphic scenes a little bit more now. And so we had a lot to do with Alex's sexual assault when she was a child. And again, like I say, I found this to be quite intensely graphic in a way that was not wholly necessary, in my opinion. I think we could have got the idea and still had the theme without it being so vividly described. I guess this is a choice on the author's part, but for me, it came across a little bit more, let's make this as intense and shocking as possible rather than give it weight, because I felt like having it be implied and leaving the reader to make those conclusions and understand where Alex is coming from would have been more impactful, in my opinion, and maybe more considerate of the character. I do think that it was done very well in terms of seeing the fallout of that and seeing how difficult it was for Alex. After that, everything kind of went back to that moment, and we had this quote here that says, "Standing there in her marine apron, watching Megan chat with the other clerk, Alex had the sudden sensation that she had died in that bathroom all those years ago, and that people had been looking through her ever since." Now, this is just so devastating and really impactful. She is pulled into that world of the dead from such a vicious and awful attack. And it really follows her, everything she does after that point, and her fear for the Greys, her getting into drugs and needing them as a relief, and her anger at the world for not helping her in that situation. It really has consequences, and I do appreciate the way that Leigh Bardugo followed that. Like I say, I just wasn't a big fan of the graphicness of the scenes, but I do appreciate how the topic was handled in the aftermath. Now, I want to go through a couple of quotes here from this very specific page, which I found very impactful. And this ties into these two characters of Darlington and Alex, and the privilege of one position and the struggle of those that are left behind by society, who maybe aren't protected or aren't offered choices. And so I'm just going to read through some of this. Basically, Alex is having a conversation with Darlington, and Darlington is disappointed in Alex, and he says, "You need to be ready next time. You weren't prepared." Alex responds, "And whose fault is that?" Darlington sat up straighter. "I beg your pardon. I gave you 2 weeks to get up to speed. I sent you specific passages to read and keep it manageable. And what about all of the years before that?" Alex stood and shoved her chair back. She paced into the breakfast room, her black hair reflecting the lamplight, energy sparking off her. The house gave a warning groan. She wasn't sad or ashamed or worried. She was mad. "Where were you?" she demanded. "All you wise men of Leith with your spells and your chalk and your books. Where were you when the dead were following me home? When they were barging into my classrooms, my bedroom, my damn bathtub? Sando said you had been tracking me for years, since I was a kid. One of you couldn't have told me how to get rid of them, that all it would take was a few magic words to send them away. They're harmless. It's only the rituals that..." Alex grabbed Darlington's glass and threw it hard against the wall, sending glass and red wine flying. "They are not harmless. You talk as if you know, like you're some kind of expert." She struck her hands against the table, leaning toward him. "You have no idea what they can do." And then later she says, "Do you know what it would have meant to me to know those words when I was a kid? It would have taken so little to change everything, but no one bothered, not until I could be useful to you." And I think this really ties into this idea that, some kids especially, I think, are just left in such vulnerable positions, and not until they can be used by society are they offered any form of protection or help or assistance, or even grace or understanding or opportunity. And then they're kind of judged and blamed by those in society that don't understand. And that's exactly what Darlington has been doing to Alex. He is talking from a place that has no idea what she's been through or how difficult it has been. But I do appreciate that he gets some character growth, and I like that he reflects on this and thinks he told himself he was giving her a chance, being fair to this girl who had washed up on his shore, but he'd let himself think of her as someone who had made all the wrong choices and stumbled down the wrong path. It hadn't occurred to him that she was being chased. I appreciate that. I like that he kind of grows and learns and understands that he's not so above her as he likes to think, and the society aren't. They're referred to as shepherds. Like, we are the shepherds who are guiding people, and he comes to realize that, maybe that's not what we are at all. We're just using people for our own gain, and also people have the capacity to make those choices for themselves. So I appreciate that. The other instance of assault in this book, I really found difficult to read. And I think this is because, for me personally, it just was not taken seriously. So we have an instance with Mercy where she is assaulted, and she's basically given this drug that makes her willing to do whatever somebody asks of her. And so she's very much sexually assaulted in a very graphic, horrible way. And she sent a video of herself doing this act that she does not remember. And Alex, understandably, is very angry about this and kind of takes revenge. But we don't hear more from Mercy and her experience with it. Does she understand what happened? Does she struggle with that? If I'm remembering correctly, she wants to go straight to another party afterwards. And I don't know, it didn't feel that true to the character, because at first she was really affected by it and then it was just kind of brushed over. So I wasn't too much of a fan of that either. I really enjoyed the relationship between Alex and the Grey, whose name I'm just completely blanking on right now. She's not supposed to let them in, but then she kind of forms a bit of a bond with this one man who was was he found guilty of killing his wife, but he didn't actually kill her, and he's still here because he wants to know who did it. So I enjoyed the pairing of the two of them. I found him quite an interesting villain in a way. I liked that. Then I'll talk a bit about the ending as well, because again, like I said, I was really kind of like, what? When I read the ending, it didn't really add up too much to me. I guess it kind of makes sense, but I think it was the writing for me. It wasn't so much what happened and it being who it was, it being Daisy, it being Barlow, is it Barlow, who were responsible for first sending Darlington to hell and for the murders and them setting up this girl. That kind of all felt in line with the plot, but I think just the chapter and the way it was written when it was explained to us just felt a little bit off to me. It didn't read very clearly, and I was left a bit confused by it and a bit like, right? I did enjoy Alex kind of understanding and finding agency in her power and how she was able to utilize that. So I'll end the spoiler review there. Overall, I think that this book had such interesting concepts, interesting world building, interesting themes, and great characters. But it was really let down by the pacing, the structure, and sometimes the way the author chose to phrase certain things. It's almost like really disappointing to me because I wanted to love this book so much and I got a lot out of it, but I also was left feeling very unsatisfied. Yeah. So overall, I am going to give this one also 3.5 stars, but I'm going to round this one up to a 4. So they're both 3.5 star reads for me from Leigh Bardugo so far. So that is 2 for 2 with Leigh Bardugo. I enjoyed both of them and I found elements in both that I really could grasp onto and that really held my interest and made me want to learn more. But both of them as well had disappointing elements. I'm going to be finishing the Shadow and Bone series next, I believe, because like I say, I really want to watch the Shadow and Bone series. So I'm going to read books 2 and 3 in my next video. Let me know though if you want me to read the next book in the Alex Stern series. I think it's Hellbent. Is it Hellbent, the name? I'm a bit in two minds about that one. I know I want to finish Shadow and Bone, but I'm not too sure if I want to finish the Alex Stern series. So let me know. Should I continue reading that one? Also let me know what else I need to read for the Shadow and Bone TV series, because I believe I have to read the duology as well, the Six of Crows duology, but I know there's another Grishaverse series as well. Do I have to read that one as well? So let me know. And also let me know if you would like to watch me watch Shadow and Bone as well, because I would love to do that. Like I said previously, I really want to start a series on my channel called Books versus Binge, where I read and watch the adaptation and the original source material to just kind of compare them. So yeah, let me know, and thank you very much for watching this video. I will be back with more Leigh Bardugo coming soon. Thank you.